So I played Fireball, I played Fireball Archmage, now I am playing Spark Archmage. I know this video's taken a while, part of that's because I kept tinkering with stuff, and part of that is because I really wanted to hit level 96. And let me tell you, there's nothing more demoralizing than going from level 95 all the way, 90% EXP, not a single death, and then dying 4 times without hitting 100, the worst of which was at 99%. So, that has been my last couple of days. And now I'm going to do a showcase for my character, because at this point the gear is pretty darn expensive. Some of those things are because the build needs relatively expensive items to function. Some of those things were because they were shiny, I happened to craft it, or I just wanted it. Don't worry, in the gearing section I'll differentiate between them. Now of course, since I'm playing one of the most powerful meta builds in Path of Exile 2, there's a very good chance this gets nerfed. And if you want to find out what I'm playing after it gets nerfed, either because it got nerfed or just because I moved on to something else, the best way to do that is to get subscribed, ring that notification bell, and hey, maybe leave a like while you're down there, because the YouTube algorithm says that I have to tell you that stuff. So for now, let's get into things. Starting with why Spark? Well, the TLDR is because I wanted to play something that was a little bit lower effort. Frostwell Fireball, really good build. Still really like how that came together, but it's pretty high effort. You have to use multiple skills. Whereas Spark, you just hold down a button and kinda win. Also, while Spark does have quite a bit of visual noise on the screen, it isn't quite as much screen clutter, so that does make dodging things a little bit easier, and it min-maxes lightning conduit better, aka you get much better boss deletion, which is why I use this character to fight way more bosses. But there are some downsides. On Frostwell, you just kinda naturally walled a bunch of enemies off. Now, technically, I could do that with Spark, but unfortunately the Frostwalls would block my Sparks in addition to blocking the enemies, so I haven't done that as much. Also, Spark has a really wide damage range. In other words, if you get unlucky and you low roll, you do much less damage than if you get lucky and you high roll, which is why I am instilling Lightning Rod. Hence the Lightning Rod Spark in my title. No, I'm not just using a random bow skill that happens to have the same name. This causes my lightning damage to be lucky. In other words, every time it attempts to deal damage, it rolls twice and takes the best result. Think of it as advantage from D&D. So if I roll a 800, and then I roll a 14,000, it's going to take the 14,000, vastly increasing my damage. Admittedly, usually it's not by that much, but you should get a picture from that. In terms of how I'm setting my Spark up, I've seen 2 ways it is primarily being played. The first is the Widow Hail version, where you get a ton of Pierce. This is kind of the super clear speed version, as you get a ton of projectile speed. The second being the Wand and Focus with Chain version. The damage on the Wand and Focus Chain version is higher per Spark, but it's not as good at hitting things a ton of times, thus it's not going to trigger Lightning Conduit quite as much. Honestly, I don't know which version is more DPS or which version is better. Both versions are ridiculous. What I do know is I tried the Widow Hail version multiple times and I did not enjoy the playstyle. So I stuck to the Wand and Focus version because I enjoyed it. The TLDR of scaling Spark, get more duration, because the longer your Sparks last, the more opportunities they have to deal damage. Get projectile speed, because the faster they move, the more opportunities they have to deal damage, and also the better they clear. Get more cast speed, so you can cast more Sparks. And then make sure to have something like Pierce or Chain to allow Sparks to interact with enemies better. I guess you can also use Fork, though that one I have not experimented with very much. After that, just hold down the button and watch Spark go burr. Trigger lightning conduits on single target to absolutely melt through bosses. Next up, there's been a lot of discussion about rarity and putting it into builds. And see, here's the thing. I'm really lazy, so I didn't want to have to go around and swap all of my gear and find rarity on different items. So I am using Mahuksaddle's Machination, a shield that by itself gives me about 200% rarity. Yes, this does noticeably increase the number of divine drops that I get. Also, no, it doesn't really matter because I still make most of my money crafting, and I don't do enough maps in a day to come even close to one big sale. So, if you want to vastly buff the loot that you get from your mapping experience, go ahead, put the shield on. You'll need 3 as Kappa Soul Cores for the 30% increased rarity, Higher rolls of a shield are better. 3 sockets is better than 2, but buy what you can afford. And also, you will need 37 strength, which probably means you're going to get to 40 strength, let's be honest, so that you can equip the shield. Now, in addition, for bossing, you will probably want a focus that has damage stats. Things like energy shield, mana, plus to level of all spell skills. And so, to make the swap smooth, make sure you don't have any resistances that you're relying on your focus, and if you have any intelligence on your focus, make sure it doesn't satisfy attribute requirements. Those things aside, you should be able to swap it pretty darn freely. Now last up, this is a CIEB Mind Over Matter Archmage setup. If what I just said was a whole bunch of word salad and you have no idea what I'm talking about, then be sure to check out my How to Scale Defenses and Damage with Archmage video after watching this one. That'll explain those mechanics in far more detail. And also, when playing the build, if you feel like you're getting one shot out of nowhere, make sure you are not using a mana flask that removes a portion of a mana recovered from your life, because yes, that does instantly kill you. So with all that out of the way, it's time to go over gear, passives, etc., starting with the Ascendancy. First up, Constant Gale into Force of Will. If you have just shy of 6,000 mana, you get a whole bunch of Arcane Surge effect, aka cast speed and mana regeneration rate. Without this, your build does not continue to massively scale not only your recovery, but your speed based on your mana, which is really important when Archmage tends to eat quite a bit of mana. Next up, Strike Twice. 2 shocks, more damage good. And last but not least, actually last and least, what am I saying? Scouring Winds. Exposure lowers resistance by an additional 20%. This is nice for bosses. This is also nice for anything where you are too lazy to cast Conductivity, but you are not too lazy to cast Orb of Storms. And aside of that, it does not matter all that much. Next up, taking a look at a tree. The main goal is to grab mana and energy shield nodes. In terms of attributes, don't copy what I have here. Try to get attributes that happen to fill your requirements. So like 20, 25 dex, 40-ish strength, and then as much int as you can get. There are, however, a few things that I want to call out because they are of special importance. First up, all of the keystones. Chaos Inoculation is very important because this is how you don't die to chaos damage and don't need chaos res. Eldritch Battery gives you a massive amount of mana. It converts the flat ES on your gear, so the ES rating the item has, over to mana. Mind Over Matter, all damage is taken from mana before life. So, even if all your ES goes away, you still have all of your mana, and... oh, I did not plan that well. All of your mana recovery. I'm going to grab one more item here. So, now we have all of the trifecta. If you're wondering, why did my ES go away? If you unequip your amulet, your ES goes away. And if the game is paused, your ES stays away. It's real fun. So, with this trifecta, you wear ES gear to get more mana. That is what this does. You have Mind Over Matter for backup defense. That's what this does. You ignore everything chaos. That's what this does. This gives you all of your ES back. Well, not all of it, but a very large portion of it, because it gives you a percentage of your maximum mana as extra maximum energy shield. And this energy shield cannot be converted back to mana, thus it does not create an infinite loop. So, outside of that stuff, what else is important? Well, ES and mana nodes. That should be pretty self-explanatory. In addition, things like alternating current for increased magnitude of shock. The more damage an enemy takes from your shocks, well, the more damage you do. And also, the better your lightning conduit nukes them into oblivion. In addition, you want branching bolts if you are not doing a pierce setup, and if you are not getting some sort of chain or fork elsewhere. This way, with the nodes preceding it, you get a 100% chance for your spark to chain, vastly improving its ability to deal damage. 2 other things that improve its ability to deal damage are preservation for the skill effect duration, so they persist for longer, and also turn the clock forwards for projectile speed, so they travel faster. Then, pure power, I mean, you have a good bit of int, so you might as well turn that into damage. Same kind of thing going on with arcane intensity. And over here, the most important thing is the Against the Darkness Jewel, with notable passive skills and radius grant +10 to spirit. Now, as of when I'm recording this video, you cannot search this on the trade site. You just have to manually go by price. I did this as part of researching for this video. They are about 20 divines. And unfortunately, this is one of the expensive parts that enables the whole build. So it's kind of mandatory. And then, depending on how much spirit you have on your chess piece and the roll here, you will take either 3 or 4 notables. If you are taking 4, these are the ones I recommend. If you are taking 3, drop Illuminated Crown. And just path this way, it's the same number of points, but because I needed to take Illuminated Crown, this is what I got. Sadly, you don't actually get any increased energy shield from your helmet because you aren't getting any ES from your helmet. Remember, all that ES is becoming mana, and then the mana is becoming ES, but the mana from your helmet that is becoming ES does not count as ES from your helmet. Now, last but not least, I am doing a fun little tricky thing that I picked up from Captain Lance, which is the curse swap. So, when I use my curse, it swaps my weapon to a staff, and the curse instantly goes off. That means if there's any enemies here, they would immediately be cursed. That is because all of these nodes are weapon set 2, and my curse is used on weapon set 2. Everything else is used on weapon set 1. So if I try to cast any other ability, I swap back. And basically what you do is you drop some damage nodes because you won't need those while you're casting your curse. And they'll come back as soon as you use anything else. This way you get Giga Curse effect and instant curse activation because you reduce the curse activation delay down to 0 between this and a support. Which, speaking of, let's talk about some skills here. So first up, Sigil of Power. This is a buff that's really nice for bosses. It's 15% more damage per stage, so you're watching my tooltip go up and up and up. My tooltip goes way up, standing in the Sigil of Power at 4 stages. You raise the stages by spending mana, which is pretty easy to do on an Archmage build. Next up, Spark. It should be self-explanatory what Spark is at this point in the video. Acceleration support for more projectile speed, that's why it's so responsive. Persistence for more skill effect duration, so they last longer. Arcane Tempo for quality of life, so it feels super fast and responsive and you can kind of just tap a button instead of having to stand there casting. Controlled Destruction is something specific to Lightning Rod. If you cannot afford Lightning Rod on your Everlasting Gaze, because it's like 15 divines, which is quite expensive, you do not need Controlled Destruction, nor do you need Lightning Rod. They are quite a bit of damage, but they aren't mandatory. And then Inspiration to make the mana costs manageable. If I'm moving around a little bit, I basically stay mana neutral, which is pretty darn nice. Also, if you want to see how much DPS you lose using Mahu for rarity, 37k, 51k. So yes, this build does vastly more damage when fighting bosses and using the proper DPS focus. But hey, getting divine drops are shiny, so it's totally worth it. Then Orb of Storms. This is like half damage, half utility. So overcharge, increased magnitude of shock. Bigger shocks, bigger lightning conduits, and also just enemies take more damage. Lightning exposure lowers enemy lightning resistance, meaning they take more damage. Strip away lowers their exposure even more. Big damage. Considered casting, this is actually just a damage support. You could replace it with a quality of life support, or allow yourself to summon 2 Orbs of Storms. I did not like doing that because it makes the duration much shorter, and I'm lazy. And then Conduction, 100% more chance to shock. This just makes it super responsive in terms of shocking enemies. But honestly, if you weren't using stuff like Lightning Rod, you could totally just put Controlled Destruction here, and it would probably still shock 100% of the time. And you could use a different support on your Spark. There's some flexibility here. Now, Conductivity, that instant swap curse. Remember, needs to be set to weapon set 2. Then all your other stuff needs to be set to weapon set 1. It needs, well, not needs, but you really want Heightened Curse for 25% increased effect. It needs Focused Curse. This is what gets rid of the eruption delay, so it goes off instantly. Then Magnified Effect is nice, and it makes it really easy to aim, but is certainly not required. For Flame Wall, I like Spell Cascade because, again, it makes it very easy for sparks to fly through. Fire Mastery boosts the damage that it adds to the sparks, because projectiles which pass through the wall deal added fire damage. And then Last Up Fortress makes it those nice circles, so more sparks can pass through. This is utility. It doesn't really do all that much damage itself, but hey, it's pretty nice. Then there's Lightning Warp, which I honestly don't really use anymore, but I still have it, because every once in a while, I'll be like, I need to cull that thing. That's what I do. Blink, which is just for teleporting around maps with Ingenuity. In more difficult content, what I do, because this build does not have enough spirit to run everything, I only have 196, I turn Blink off, and I turn Cast on Shock on. This is like Delirium content, Pinnacle bossing, all this stuff. I will go slower because I am now rolling instead of blinking, but I will do vastly more damage because I have Lightning Conduit, which is basically the infinite damage skill right now. It's supported with Energy Retention and Impetus to maximize the proc rate, Elemental Focus because you can't shock with it anyway, and Concentrated Effect because if one regular one already deletes the boss, one Concentrated Effect one deletes the boss and deletes like half of the boss's next life. Then for Archmage, the most important thing is you need at least a level 19 gem. Now you can just buy a level 20. It's a waste of money. You're welcome to do that. Or you can buy and quality a bunch of level 19s and corrupt them to get +1 level from corruption, and then get +1 level from Lightning Mastery, bringing it to 21 for the extra 1%. Admittedly, I know I just said that it is a waste of money to buy a level 20, but you know what? Who knows what's going to happen in the future? Maybe more level 20s will drop, people will stop using them as much, and in the future it's going to be more cost efficient. What you should do is compare the cost of GCPs and corrupting like 10-ish of these yourself versus the cost of a level 20 gem, because from my experience, level 19s drop enough if they're basically just free. Next up, Grim Feast. While technically not strictly necessary, it feels really, really good, especially when mapping. When mapping, I would say you really want Grim Feast. When bossing, it's not as important because you don't get the juicy overshield. I guess I should say overflow. If you're really starved for spirit, I guess what you can do is cut this when bossing to make sure you can run your cast on shock, but you're going to kind of be out of luck in deli maps because there are times where I'm running 100% less recovery map because my Atlas is just kind of fucked. And yeah, without Grim Feast, I just have no energy shield the entire time. So I don't advise dropping this. Now, let's have a change of scenery. Go to the savannah. Ah, yes. The smell of smoke, the corpses. Feels like home. So, now I'm going to go over my gear. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why the mods are on the items. Again, disclaimer, a lot of my stuff is very expensive. Don't try to just copy it verbatim. So for a wand, you want either +2 level of all lightning spell skills, or +1/2 level of all spell skills. After that, mana scales your damage, but mana is not actually the most important stat to have on a weapon, because you can get a lot of mana elsewhere. Increased spell damage or increased lightning damage is the second most important stat. The third most important, in my opinion, is cast speed, because this build already does so much damage that I would really rather have the quality of life. For example, 0.21, I take this off, 0.24. That is a notable drop in quality of life. So, I would say you want a weapon with spell skills, spell or lightning damage. After that, it's up to you, honestly, between cast speed and mana, but I would go with a higher cast speed roll and a lower mana roll. But once you get to like 20-ish%, cast speed's good, then get mana. If you can get mana regeneration rate, even better. And if you're wondering, why are you using a 5 mod item? It's not, it just has a hybrid mod that makes it look like it. Was kind of hoping that, sadly, not so lucky. It's okay, it's still pretty sick. Then for gloves, this is where I'm getting some of my dexterity to use my support gems. Aside of that, int is a good suffix, cold res, fire res, lightning res. Any of those are really interchangeable because you can always swap stuff on your tree. For prefixes, this is the hard part, because gloves have a bunch of junk mods. If you want to know more about that, check out my video on how to craft energy shield gloves. Don't worry, it's going to get plugged more. So, try to get gloves with max mana and good ES prefixes and decent suffixes. I'm not super happy with the suffixes here. You will notice the quality of suffixes on my gloves is actually worse than on my other items. That is because gloves are super hard to roll and a pain, and really good gloves are going to be like 30, 40 divines, but also gloves aren't super impactful on your build. So you're better off using okay gloves that don't cost you a fortune. Next up, the helmet. Helmets are quite easy to roll. They give you a lot of ES. They can have good suffixes. Get a good helmet. It's going to be relatively inexpensive, or if you want to try to roll one for yourself, again, refer to my video. Look for ES and mana as prefixes. I really think it's a good idea to get intelligence as a suffix, and this is one of those places where if you can fit it, maybe try to squeeze in a little rarity, which in my case is a very little rarity at 8%. Then there is the Everlasting Gaze. This item is mandatory. Try to give it 30% of maximum mana as extra maximum energy shield. Makes a huge difference on your ES. Also, make sure to catalyze it so you get extra mana. For boots, the most important stat is movement speed. Boots are also kind of hard to get mana, good suffixes, and ES. What I would advise here is to get good suffixes and mana, because you don't actually need that much ES to have an okay pair of boots. These are an amazing pair of boots because they are corrupted. If you're wondering, 4% increased max mana. Why is that? Over here you have armor, evasion, and energy shield. Is there some logic to it? Yes, there is. I bought this with the rune in it, and I can't swap it. I would actually prefer maximum mana, but I can't do that. Here, I put the rune in myself because armor, evasion, and energy shield on a piece like a helmet that has so much ES is going to outweigh the mana, in my opinion, though it might depend very slightly on your gear. Another really big source of energy shield is your chest piece. I have a very good chest piece with a whole bunch of spirit, good resistance suffixes, and double energy shield. I got very lucky with this. How lucky? Well, originally I bought it, and it was missing some affixes, so I decided to gamble. The suffixes weren't great, so I used an Omen of Whittling, which cost me 6 divines, with the goal of trying to remove the bad suffix and chaos into something else. As it turns out, it went really, really well. But if you are looking for something a little bit more affordable, consider a Morior Invictus. This will require that you get 51 strength, 51 dex, which does kind of tax your attributes, but you can use it to get a whole bunch of all elemental resistance, or extra mana, or extra rarity. Look for maximum mana per socketed rune or soul core. This will come very close to giving the same amount of mana as a chest piece like this. It also gives slightly more res and functionally the same spirit. Right now, 6 unreserved, so 50 versus 56 doesn't really matter. But just keep in mind your energy shield will be lower, which means it's a little easier to get stunned, that kind of fun stuff. Next up, while not strictly required, I would strongly recommend that if you can afford it, you buy an Ingenuity. This massively increases your bonuses from rings. How massively? Well, I have 5840 mana, and now 5321. That's a pretty big difference. That is because you can use breach rings, massively juice for mana, get mana regen, get cast speed, maybe even some resistances or damage if you're lucky. Try to get breach rings with mana, and if you're on a budget, either cast speed or mana regeneration rate, you can have one good roll on one and one good roll on the other and be okay. But as you have more and more money to spend, try to get both, Also, try to get some res on top. Just keep in mind it gets very expensive at that point. Now, in addition, I'm using a Melting Maelstrom. This is an instant way to fully recover my mana. So, if my mana goes down a lot, it's just back. This is also really good if your energy shield gets blown away by damage, and you end up tanking a bunch of hits. It is also 30 divines, and in no way required. So, only buy this if you have money to throw away. Do not buy this if you are on a budget. Then you've got the bossing focus. Look for high energy shield, high mana, +2 to level of all spell skills. Anything like ES Recharge Rate Intelligence, that's really nice icing on the cake. That's a pretty sweet red velvet cake anyway. Now, in terms of what should you be trying to craft and what shouldn't you be trying to craft? I would not advise trying to craft a focus, because the +2 level of all spell skills is not only very rare, but it has no tags, so you can't target it with essences. Huge pain. I would say boots and helmet are good candidates of things to craft. Again, see my video on how to craft ES gear. The chest piece is a little tricky. Spirit has a decent weighting, especially if you only need 50, but unfortunately it is untagged, which makes things a little bit awkward, as, in my opinion, the best method is to take a base chest piece, transmute it, hope you hit Spirit. After you hit Spirit, use an essence to force ES, hope you slam ES. Alternatively, you can do it the other way, double essence for ES. If it has good ES, hope you slam Spirit with a random exalt. Neither way is super, super great, but it might get you there eventually, and if you're doing it the transmute way and only going with the essences when you hit good Spirit, there's a pretty good chance it's going to sell for more than it costs to make. Now, I've not had very much luck crafting weapons. You can, on item level 81 bases, which this is not, go for +5 to all lightning spell skills, but it's kind of a lot of things to hit in a row. Also, some of the essences are getting quite expensive for that. Breach rings are also kind of a pain to craft because they have a lot of junk modifiers that have the mana tag. So basically, you try to YOLO RNG your way into mana, and after you have mana, or more ideally you have double mana, you use a greater essence of sorcery to force the cast speed, because it's the only caster mod, but it's kind of a pain to get to the point where you have the double mana, or even single mana. Obviously, you cannot craft the uniques. You can craft jewels, but my experience has been that it's better to buy them, as a lot of these were only a couple divines each. So, look for increased maximum energy shield, and ideally, increased magnitude of shock you inflict. After that, maximum energy shield as additional stun threshold is pretty nice. Mana regeneration rate, pretty nice. Spell damage is nice, but usually you will want 2 prefixes, so you'll only get that if you corrupt your jewels. Something like recover mana on kill, really good. Meta skills gain increased energy, also a good mod. And chance to shock isn't too bad either, although I don't think I have any at the moment. Pretty sure all the chance to shock jewels, sadly, did not survive the corruption process. That's okay, they were weak, and we like strong jewels around here. So last up, what's my atlas like? At the moment, it is like this. I'm taking Deadly Evolution to make rare monsters more valuable, Unstable Energies to make my maps more deadly because I hate myself, and also because it makes them much more rewarding, Teeming Horde for more monsters, because killing monsters is fun sometimes, and then pretty much just the connecting / nearby nodes to really juice the modifiers up as much as possible. Still not 100% sure if I want this stuff or if I want to go back to double corrupting. The double corrupting was sometimes annoying, and I got tired of having to vol all of my maps. For mechanics, Breach. Get more monster density, because that's the main reason why Breach is good. Then, I've been using this for a chance. Honestly, I don't know if it's optimal, but it's really fun to have a 10 Breach map, so I'm going to keep using it, even if it's not. And Interdimensional Assault, because I can tear through the breaches pretty darn fast, so might as well make it faster and increase the monster density. Then Expedition, which I've also been farming a lot. Extra runic monsters and extra runic monsters with more exotic coinage. The plan is just target runic monster markers. For bosses, I've probably spec'd this wrong, to be honest. I kind of feel like I should be Beyond Reality instead of Fit for a King. But I don't know. Spoils of War, Fit for a King, more loot, essences, because why not? Still haven't gotten a single greater essence from a boss map. And then Organized Forces, boss maps are irradiated, so +1 to monster level, so they have better drops, and you are much more likely to get tier 15 maps. Over here, Delirium. More about why I only have 4 points for that later. Currently using Would You Like to See My Face, because this is much better if you don't actually run Delirium mirrors at all, and instead run Delirious maps. Then, regardless of any of this stuff, Get Out of My Head is amazing, because you get free instilled emotions applied to your maps. It makes them super deadly, it's awesome. Also, it makes them way more rewarding. Then, for Ritual, he approaches for more chances at an audience with a king. It's like 7 divines, totally worth it. Tempting offers to reroll more times to try to get that. And after that, I've been taking Spreading Darkness, but I kind of want to take From the Mists. Honestly, I don't know what the last 2 points are supposed to be. Not this. The last 2 points are supposed to be not this. But then in terms of the Arbiter, I killed him once and then forgot about his existence, so I don't have most of the points. I should really go do that more, but I don't have the keys and I'm too lazy to buy them. So that's a build. How does it handle content? Well, if we're talking about something like Zesht, it rips through the boss in mere seconds. Honestly, this is super, super easy, and if you want to kill Zesht a bunch of times, or maybe sell carries, this is great, because in addition to ripping through the boss, oh boy, can it take hits. He basically can't kill you unless you really just stand in everything. Maybe if you get frozen, but even then, you can get hit like 3 times without dying most of the time, and Melting Maelstrom, if you have it, should save you, even if you get hit 3 times. So yeah, pretty safe there. King in the Mists, he doesn't have very much health. This build bursts him down before he's really able to do anything. Unfortunately, this means you still do have to do the Maze Phase, because the Maze Phase can't be skipped. But aside of that, really easy. Simulacrum, the first time I did it, really easy. The second time I did it, really easy. The third time I did it, I died. Because when the monsters come out of the mirrors, they can't be targeted or damaged. So they're kind of running around invulnerable. When they charge into you, you get knocked back, so you can't cast Spark for a very short duration. But then, if multiple monsters keep charging into you and knocking you back, you keep not being able to cast, and then sometimes you get pushed into a mana siphoner, and it's just a bad time, and I hate Simulacrum, and I haven't gone back, and that's why I only have 4 points out of 8, because I just don't enjoy it. As for Breach and Expedition and maps, rituals, it's all free loot. The sparks bounce around and obliterate everything. I've even been running Delirious maps, which admittedly, Delirious maps in like 600 to 900% Waystone drop modifier bosses, those start to get a little sketchy, especially if I forget to turn on my Lightning Conduit and the fight actually lasts a little bit. As long as I remember to turn on my Lightning Conduit, though, it's really not that bad overall. But if your gear isn't as juiced, and you just want to do regular mapping, this is a great build for speeding through, because in lower difficulty content, 1 spark hit is going to instantly kill an enemy. So instead of standing there and casting and holding down your spark, you're kind of just tapping and running through, tapping and running through. You can drop Lightning Conduit entirely for Blink, which makes you much, much faster, makes the build feel super fluid by comparison. And remember, once you drop your curse on an enemy, their resistances are basically 0 from that alone. Exposure is going to take it way into the negative, shock's going to massively increase the damage they take, and all of a sudden the enemy is just melting right in front of your eyes. So overall, this is a very fun build. I found it to be very responsive. I've used it to the point where I'd say it's all content viable. Honestly, I'm sure it can even do the Simulacrum. I just don't enjoy it and didn't feel any motivation to go back. Because, honestly, all Delirium does is make my maps look gray and depressing and add like 50 exalts in value each anyway. Okay, when I say it like that, maybe I should go back and do those points. I guess I'll do that after I hit level 96. But also, almost more so than playing the build, crafting the gear for the build has been super, super fun to me. That was part of why I went away from the unique chest. It's not that the unique chest has bad stats, it's that you can't craft it. It's more fun for me to craft stuff myself, which is why I have an incredibly overexpensive and definitely not necessary 830 ES rare chest. But hey, it was a blast to make, and if I don't find something else to play, which at this point, I keep thinking I'm going to find something else to play, and then I keep min-maxing this build more, maybe I'll start corrupting all my gear and go to the next level. Or maybe I will experiment with Doom Blast, because that looks pretty neat. Or maybe I'll finally level that mercenary. I don't know. I guess you're going to have to just get subscribed if you want to see what I'm doing next. But hey, with that said, if you want to know more about how I continue to scale my gear, I'm going to link to all of my other builds down below. Started on Cast on Freeze. That got nerfed, so I immediately pivoted to Fireball Frostwall. Then I scaled into CI. Then I min-maxed the CI version. Then I turned it into an Archmage version. And now I'm Spark Mage. So we've kind of come full circle in a way. Or at the very least, came full circle in the sense that Spark was one of the skills that I used while leveling. You can watch any of those up in the card and down below. Also, if you want a reference sheet, there's a planner of your own max roll. And if you want to know how to scale both your damage and defenses with Archmage, the setup that I'm using, I'll link to that video, along with a video on how to craft energy shield gear. For now, thank you very much for watching to the end. I'm glad you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.